Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast with me, your host, Christy Houle. And today we are delighted to be sitting down with James Young, sixth grade musical theater teacher at Johnson-Wabash Sixth Grade Center in the Ferguson-Florissant School District, who was named the 2022 Missouri Teacher of the Year. James is a graduate of the University of Missouri St. Louis College of Education, and he leads an innovative musical theater program where students learn basic music theory concepts, but also how to project self-confidence and be their best selves. James, welcome to the Classroom Matters podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks for having me. It is an honor and a privilege.
Okay, so I'm so excited. So James and I were already talking for a few minutes before we started recording, and most of you know that know that I am a former Ferguson-Florissant, very proud member. I know, right? Shout out to Ferguson-Florissant. And so I could not be more thrilled that one of the finest was named Missouri's 2022 Teacher of the Year. So James, talk to us a little bit as we get started about your background and your journey just into education in general.
Okay. So my background in education, teaching was the plan B. I'm a musician at heart, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. I guess I never considered it. Although, interestingly enough, my great grandmother, Hattie Stevenson, years before I thought about becoming a teacher, she said, you have the patience to be a teacher. And I'm like, huh? So I was in the military for 3 years right out of high school. Then I worked some different jobs. 3 years after that, I worked different jobs and things, and it just wasn't clicking for me. There was more, and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just I need to become a more professional musician. So I went back to school for music, but at the same time, I had my grandmother, Elizabeth Hutcherson Rux, who said, well, why don't you just consider music education as a plan B, just in case things don't work out? Well, the plan B quickly turned into plan A. And I just discovered, like a calling for teaching, a love for teaching, the more and the deeper I got into it. And so here I am, the classroom really seemed to be a place where I could come alive. And it seemed to be a place where I could use a culmination of all the skills that I've learned to help students and be successful.
Mm-hmm. So how many years have you been teaching in general, in total, and then how many years have you been in this school, in this district?
Okay, so this is year 15, and then I've spent about 3 of those years have been outside of the district.
So you have been named Missouri's Teacher of the Year in a very, very interesting time in our world of education. And I hate to continue, to say what we're going through and the pandemic, but I think we're kind of past that now. I think this is really truly could potentially be our new normal as far as education. So how difficult has it been over the last year, I guess 2 years now, to not only teach, but to teach music in multiple settings, hybrid, remote, in person, and then back to hybrid, and then back to remote, and not only do it, but do it astonishingly well enough to be named the Teacher of the Year?
It has been challenging. It's hard to look at a screen. Even like right now, it's hard not to be in person and having that personal conversation. It's hard not to read the full body language of a classroom. That's really challenging. It's hard to teach music when you can't sing at the same time because the synchronization is off. But what we learned to lean on was just that, making those connections, finding new ways to reinvent how we deliver that fine arts education. And so still, and I feel like we still had some successes. It wasn't perfect. I'm really glad to be back in the classroom. And I feel like a lot of the things that I learned during this pandemic time and virtual and all that has only sharpened me as a teacher. And really grateful for the technology that we have now. We're one-to-one, in our district now. That's a plus. And so, but we do have some ground to cover, both educationally, but I think also, emotionally, personally, because now we're learning how to reconnect. And, what does that look like? So But sometimes, the greatest ideas, the greatest inventions, and the greatest innovations come from challenging times. And so that's what I'm hopeful of through all of this.
And how did you guys get through a mask mandate in music? I would, when I thought about when I thought about you and I thought about what you do, and I was like, my goodness, because our district just removed the mask mandate this week. And
Okay.
so my children have been, going to class. And so I thought about you and I thought, man, I would love to find out, how do you work around singing and music without a mask on?
We sing through it. It's not easy. It's not easy, but I think it takes a bit of an imagination and just hopefulness. And I think continuing to display hope and, in my attitude, continuing to encourage and let students know, hey, we're in it together. We're all doing this at the same time. And it's not perfect. But once again, I think it builds resilience. But it has been challenging. We're still wearing masks in our school, so it's still something we're doing. But we're working through it. And I think so. I think as long as it's really about perspective. I think so much of life is about perspective. And so I think if I keep a positive perspective, students see that, and then they can emulate it, hopefully.
Yeah, and so speaking about a positive perspective and a role model, there's a lot of children that really look forward to music or art
Mhm.
because it's really something that draws the creativity out in them. And not all students are made for the worksheets and the books and
Sure.
the math and the reading. So are you seeing a lot of children really flourish over the last year in your classroom, your musical theater classroom? Have you had that challenge with students where they really just want to only be in the music room?
Yeah, we do have students coming to us, trying to come to us at all times of the day. I think it is a place to connect, and so yeah, I think it is a place to connect. But I think it's always been a place to connect. I think music has always been a place for some students where they're really going to thrive. But here's what's interesting though. But some students don't realize how much they appreciate the arts, even until they leave. We had students. I often have students get to my class because it's not technically an elective, and they're like, I don't sing and I don't want to get on stage and I don't want to do anything. I don't want any part of that. And then by the end, they love it and they don't want to leave. I have students coming back to me that I had first because we're a semester long class. Mr. Young, I want to be back in your class. And so we do see that, but sometimes it's just getting kids to warm up to the idea that you can, and that's the confidence piece. You can do this. You have so much potential. You're amazing. And it's not just about you being the greatest superstar ever, but it is about what you said in the entry, being your best self and presenting yourself in a way that sets you up for success for anything you go into in life.
Mhm. And I think that is something that makes you so special and inspiring and unique, is that you're not just there to teach music. You're there to really shape and mold the whole child. So, how do you do that? What are some ways that you have really, you really intentionally reach out and touch children like that? What's some of your secrets?
I don't know if they're secrets, but I think my best ideas are stolen. But I think it is. It's trying to see what connects best. We always start our day off with warm ups where we stretch, we get up out of our seats. Because sitting, gosh, that has been the nemesis for all of us during this virtual time. I mean, now we're getting out of it. But I was sitting all day today in PD because we had a snow day, and I was so glad to stand up. So I think so. We start off with stretching, and we do some breathing, and then I think we just really trying to find entry points into their interests, into their ideas, and finding creative ways to change what we do so it's a little more tailor made. Our first year, we did The Lion King. We did a production of The Lion King, which was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And then COVID shut us down for the second semester because my first year teaching musical theater was in 2019. And so we had to reinvent. And so this is the second year, we've done more of a tailor-made program where each student is making their own individual videos and contributions to this overall show. And so I guess that's really key. Like I said, finding those entry points of interest and making those connections, letting them know you don't have to be a potential fine arts forever person to get something out of this class and take it with you and to help you become who you're going to be.
So, when you were named Missouri's Teacher of the Year this year,
Mhm.
how surprised were you, and what was that process like for you?
It was surreal, but I'll be honest with you. Like, I was surprised to get Building Teacher of the Year. I was thrilled. I was so excited. We were just coming back to school from being out virtual, and just that surprise and awe and like, wow, I'm a music teacher. Sometimes I feel like I do my job, but I'm a music teacher. But there's I really felt appreciated, thankful and grateful to my colleagues, my school, my principal. But then, I guess state teacher of the year, something I never would have imagined. I feel like it's a huge victory for our community, for our schools, but for even for my own family. I'm walking in the legacy of my grandmother. I was telling you before we got on. She was a music teacher, retired music teacher from the district, and did some amazing things, and was a huge mentor in my life through college. And so I just felt honored to be able to carry on her legacy. As a matter of fact, the reason, even my motivation for like going through the process, because there were a lot of essays and there was a big interview. I just kept saying to myself, I'm doing this, for my grandmother, for her legacy. And so that was some fuel. And so getting named was really just an honor and a tribute to her as well.
And how are your students and your family responding to all of this, exciting stuff that's happening for you this year?
Um, wow, it's good. It's a mix. It's really good, but then it does take me out of the classroom sometimes. So that can be, and away from home sometimes, and so that can be kind of challenging. Some of the trips my family has been able to make with me. But it's interesting. I will say this: I had a student. I was explaining to one of my classes, "Hey, I'm sorry that I've had to be out. I know it's not easy for me to be gone." And the student said to me, "Hey, Mr. Young, you don't have to apologize. You're teacher of the year." And I'm like, wow, so they get it, and I feel like I felt that same sense of love and support from my family as well. They see the bigger mission, of what this is. And so they've been very supportive.
Yeah. And how important do you think, that kind of brings me to the question of relationships, because you must have great relationships with your students for them to understand that and to really be so happy for you and to sort of be thinking more about your feelings, right? Like, don't worry about it. We
Mhm.
got this. You go do what you have to do, Mr. Young. So,
Yeah.
how important is it in education, especially now when things are really, I think, in a transitional period over the last 2 to 3 years? How important is it to really create and build those relationships with not only your students, but the parents as well?
hmm It's very critical. We were talking about that today in a professional development meeting. Um, it Everything has to stem from those connections and those relationships of trust. We were talking about that. You have to, when I say trust, getting students, parents, community to trust that you have their best interests in mind. And that takes time, and it takes consistency, and it takes letting your heart show, a little bit. And so it's not always easy, especially coming off once again a pandemic where we've been so separated in our boxes, so to speak, to come back in and sort of earn that trust again, or continue where we left off, or you know so yeah, it's critically important. You lay that foundation of trust and connection, and everything can grow and build, and it's amazing what can happen.
And I'm sure that's also important when you have students that come in that aren't as motivated to be in that class, right? So
Yes.
give me some examples of how you have a student that comes in and really doesn't want to be there. Musical theater is not their thing. They feel like they aren't good at it, and but they're stuck in this class. So what are some things that you do to help motivate those types of students that are really struggling?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, I let them know that they're welcome. They're welcome. There's no prerequisites. If you're in here, you're welcomed here, and we're glad that you're here. Second of all, I think there is an art to knowing when to push and when to pull back, and say no, that's too much, or and so just giving that grace to say, hey, maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. And so I try to do a lot of scaffolding. Um, students will support each other. I think if you create the right environment or the right culture, and that's what a lot of what our class is about, is creating a culture where students feel safe enough to stand up in front of the class and speak or sing. And one of the things I love about I co-teach with a theater teacher, so we get to collaborate in front of them, and that's really cool. That's really been awesome. And so it takes different things for different students, and so I'm constantly learning, constantly reflecting. Did we do that the best? I haven't arrived. I'm still, and I think that's another thing that's so important, is me realizing that I still have a lot to learn, and that students are teaching me even as I'm teaching them. And as long as I don't get stuck in this idea that I've got it all figured out and this is the way I've always done it, then I think students can sense that too, and I think that's a powerful message to them.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And thinking about the future, what are some things that you are most looking forward to with this upcoming year that you're in as Teacher of the Year?
Yeah, so I'm interested. Like I've got to meet so many great teachers and different people from other places. I just look forward to continuing to meet people and get to do a little more traveling around the state. I get to do a conference. Well, I got several things coming up here in March, and I'm excited. One of the things and platforms I'm excited about is just even talking to young students who are aspiring teachers. I get to do an Educators Rising conference here at the beginning of March, and encouraging new creatives or um, a new workforce into the tradition, into the profession. It's so important, and just putting a good name out there for the teaching profession and for education. Because it's really hard to get bogged down. And so I think I'm excited about that, to help be part of the solution. I don't have all the answers, but if I can be a light and a positive voice of hope, then I look forward to that.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting and important that you brought that up because, as most people listening know, we are really in an epidemic of not only a teacher shortage, but we have so many great teachers that are leaving the profession. We
Yes.
have we have students that are currently, going into college and not even wanting to be a teacher, and a lot of
Hmm.
that, a lot of that was happening prior to the pandemic, but I believe it's gotten worse
Yeah.
as this pandemic has hit, and a lot of folks like are doing what you said, right? They're getting really bogged down with the stress
Hmm.
and with the inconsistency of the learning environment. And so
Yes.
what are things that you do, and what's some advice that you would give to teachers that are either saying no way, I would never go into the teaching profession, or teachers that are already in the profession that are like, I want to get out of here? What are
Sure.
some things that keep you going, because I'm sure that even the best of the best
Hmm.
has those days, right? We all have those days no matter how great we
Yes.
are. So how do you break down those obstacles? How do you get past when you start having those days?
I definitely have those days. I definitely, and I've had years where I'm like, am I really supposed to be doing this? um, so on a personal level, my faith plays a big part of that. But that's personal. For me, is my faith. Another thing that I have is, you know, students, they'll let you know, and holding on to those times when they let you know that you're making a difference in their life, and um, you're important for them to be there. And so, but then the other thing is too, just, reaching out when you are hurting, when you have an issue or a concern, having time to talk with other teachers or even mentor teachers. And so, once again, like I said, I'm in a situation right now where I can collaborative teach, and I love it. I love that. I'd like to see more collaborative teaching. Um, you know, so that I think that would be something to explore, because it's just easier to bear the burden. So I guess, and then also remembering, I suppose, the privilege it is to inspire young minds. But I know it's hard. I'm not going to pretend like every day is rosy, and that I never have any troubles or never have any issues, or I don't get tired. I'm tired every day when I go home. But is it worth it? And I would say at the end of the day, yes. I told my students the other day, and I don't know if they believe me, but I said, this is the best job I've ever had. And I still believe that. And I've worked a lot of jobs, from the military to changing oil in cars, to selling guitars, to warehouse factory. And this is the best job that I could think of. And so just I guess remembering your why and holding on to that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really wonderful and sound advice coming from an amazing educator, Missouri's 2022 Teacher of the Year, James Young. And you're teaching sixth graders. So that
Yes.
in itself is just bless you, because I have a sixth grader
Hey,
at home, an eighth grader at home, and a senior, and there is no way, James, that I'm spending a day.
and people say that they're like, "Oh, you teach middle school." And I think it does take a special, um, but I think it takes a special kind of person to teach kindergarten. I think whatever level you're at, there is an art to it, and I love teaching middle school. I love it. It's just it's a good wheelhouse for me. And so yeah, it's. But anything in life worth doing is going to have some tension, some struggle. But then I guess just hanging on to those light bulb moments, because students will let you know, and it's not always, oh, you're the greatest teacher in the world. Maybe it's just a high five, or maybe they say hi in the hallway to you every time they see you, or maybe it's years down the road. I've had students reach out to me years down the road and say and thank me or say something, and so it's holding on to those things.
Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. And congratulations, James. We're so thrilled for you being the Missouri's 2022 Teacher of the Year. And we really appreciate the time that you were able to come and spend with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this is Christy Houle signing out for another episode of the Classroom Matters podcast.